My name's Jo. I work for Live Well Luton in the Stop Smoking service, and I've been contacted by a lovely guy called Gary who's here today to tell his story. Hi Gary.
Hi there. Okay, well my story starts actually before I was born. Both my parents were smokers, so my mum back in the early 60s smoked all through the pregnancy. Obviously there wasn't as much information available in those days as there is now. People didn't realise the damage or the harm it could do. When I was born, we lived in a little 2 up 2 down house, and the parents again smoked in the house. I can remember going on little journeys to Wales to visit cousins and aunties. There'd be 3 adults and 3 kids in the car, and it'd be a 4-hour journey, and all the adults would smoke all the way there. Yeah. At age 13, you know, I could see all the cool kids were smoking, so I wanted to be like them. And I can remember buying 10 number 10 for 10 pence, you know, so I could be one of the cool kids. And in those days, in your lunch hour at school, you could go out to the ice cream van and buy single cigarettes, and a lot of kids chose to do that. So I started smoking very early. Obviously, when I got a full-time job, I could afford to smoke, you know, more cigarettes. And over the years, you know, people started realising the dangers of smoking, and I would try and stop, but I wasn't very good at quitting smoking. There wasn't a lot of support in those early days, and slightest little reason, I'll have a cigarette, calm myself down. Yeah. And every year I started getting chest infections and a little sort of niggly cough, nothing major. But one day when I was 53, I was at work and started getting a few pains in my chest, and it wasn't the heart side, so I wasn't too bothered, and it wasn't agony, but the pains sort of kept going on, coming and going. So in the end I said to my boss that just to be on the safe side, I'm going to pop up the hospital. So I went up the hospital, and they had a look at me, gave me a scan, said it's probably a chest infection, and gave me some antibiotics. 4 weeks later, it still was quite bad, so ended up going back to the hospital, and they gave me a further scan, and they said, well, it could be pleurisy, you know, we'll get the results of this scan in a few weeks. A few weeks went by, and I was at work, and I got a phone call from the hospital saying, oh, we got the results of your scan. So I said, oh great, you know, when do you want me to come up? And they said, could you come up now? Wow. So of course, as soon as they said now, I thought, wow, this is serious. So I called my wife, and she met me, and we went up the hospital. And normally there's a massive wait, but they just sort of put us straight through to a little room with 3 people in there. And the doctor said, look, I won't beat about the bush, but you've got small cell lung cancer, stage 2. This is a very, very aggressive cancer, and it's caused mainly by smoking. So I said, oh right, okay, you know, what do I do then to cure it? And he said, well, this isn't curable. Unfortunately, you know, there's no cure for this, and that's that. So I said, well, how long have I got? And he said, well, I'd say probably 6 months. So I said, well, that's a bit harsh, 6 months, you know, crikey. So what about if I have chemo and radiotherapy? So he said to me, well, the thing is this, you can have chemo and radiotherapy. That might buy you a few extra months. However, you've got to be made aware that chemotherapy is very dangerous, and there's no guarantee that you would survive the chemotherapy, because your cancer is very aggressive. We'd have to give you a very aggressive treatment. As well as that, you'd have to have the radiotherapy. So this might buy you a few extra months, but it's a lot to go through. You know, there's no guarantee you'd survive that. So I thought about it for a few minutes and thought, well, I've got 3 children that are old, but I've got 2 young children, and if I can get a few extra months with them, I think that's something that I need to do. So I agreed to the treatment, and I said, right, yeah, I'll have the treatment, let's crack on. And he said, well, no, you have to wait about a month. And I'm like, a month? You know, you've told me this is really aggressive and it's spreading quickly. And I said, well, unfortunately we can't move forward before then because we have to plan all this and how we do it. And so he said, look, go away and process this information. So obviously we've come out, my wife's very upset, and then I've realised, wow, I've got to now go and tell my parents, I've got to tell my older children, all my family, my friends. How do you do that? You know, so you end up telling the same story, 30, 40 times. And then I think to myself, well, what do I tell my younger children? They're not going to be able to accept this. My older children, fair enough, they're a bit older, they've got children of their own. But how do I tell my little children this? What do I tell them? So then also you've got to think, well, I need to start getting my affairs in order. I need to make a will. I need to contact my company. I need to look at all my insurances and make sure that everything is all in order. So, over the next few weeks, that's what I was doing. I immediately stopped smoking and found it very easy, even after all the years of trying and not being able to. I did it with aids, to help me.
Yeah.
But for the first time ever, I managed to give up smoking. I know it's a bit late. And then a month later, I started my chemo. And after the first chemo, I thought, well, I don't see what all the fuss is about. It's not really that, it's not bothering me. Till a few days later. And then I thought, oh God, I don't know if I could do any more of this. And I had my second and third chemo. After my third chemo, I started getting some pains in my toes, in my right leg, sort of like they were going a bit numb. And I got up and thought it was just pins and needles and started walking around, but it didn't get any better. So I ended up having to go to the Luton Hospital, and they did a few tests and sent me to Bedford Hospital. When I arrived at Bedford Hospital, I was met by this surgeon, and he said he believed that the arteries in my leg, the blood wasn't getting through to my foot. So he said the only way we can find out is to take you into theatre, cut you open, let me go in and have a look, which he did. When I came round, he said, look, this is what's happened. Because you've been a smoker for so many years, your arteries and veins are narrowed. The chemotherapy tends to thicken your blood. So with the two things together, it's meant that the blood hasn't got down to the veins that it should have, they're blocked. I've unblocked what I could, but some are so small I can't do it. What we're going to have to do is monitor you now over the next X amount of days, giving you blood thinning drugs in the hope that this is going to fix it. So I was in Bedford Hospital, my foot started turning black. The pain, I've had toothache, earache, there's no pain like this. They gave me morphine, they gave me ketamine, they gave me tramadol, they gave me every kind of painkiller they could. That would stop the pain for maybe 5 minutes and it would come back, but it would be worse. And they would say, well, you've got to wait another 45 minutes before we can give you any more. So you'd lay there in agony screaming for 45 minutes until you had your next painkiller. This went on for 10 days. And each day my foot got blacker, my legs started going black. Until in the end, I begged them to cut my leg off. I said, if you don't cut it off, I'll cut it off myself because I can't stand this pain any longer. And they agreed. So I went down for surgery and they cut my right leg off just under the knee. They then said because this had been caused by the chemo, I couldn't have the last course of chemo. So, I thought, well, with 4 lots of chemo and the radiotherapy, I was going to get an extra few months, but now the chemo's finished early. What does this mean to my prognosis? So after 6 weeks, I got a prosthetic leg and was able to walk again. I qualified for a mobility car, so I was able to drive again. If I got a prognosis that, you know, I was going to get a bit longer, I would have to carry on working because I have a mortgage and bills. But I had to go to Mount Vernon for my radiotherapy. And the radiotherapy, I had to have 30 sessions to my chest, and it was 2 sessions a day. So this meant that I had to go to Mount Vernon early in the morning and have radiotherapy, and then 8 hours later have it again. And I had to do that 15 days in a row. So this meant, so I wasn't allowed to drive. Someone had to drive me to Mount Vernon. I had the treatment, they drive me back to Luton, and then 6 or 7 hours later drive me back to Mount Vernon, have the treatment again, and then back home. So you imagine doing this 30 times. You know, I had to have a whole host of friends and family volunteer. I'll drive you there, or I'll pick you up, and I'll drive you there the next day, or I'll take you the day after that. People were arranging their holidays and their shift patterns to try and help me so that I could have this treatment. So I had that treatment for 2 weeks, or 15 days. I then had to have 10 sessions of radiotherapy to the brain, because they said that is where it would spread to next. So I had 10 sessions of radiotherapy to the brain. And then I had a scan after that, and the result of this scan would tell me how long the prognosis would be from the 6 months that they originally said. So 2 weeks went by and they called me in, and I went in and they said, oh, the prognosis is now 15 months. So I was like over the moon. I thought 15 months, that's, you know, almost an extra year with my children. But the doctor said, look, what we're going to do in 6 weeks' time, we're going to do another scan, because the radiotherapy keeps working for an extra 6 weeks. So we'll get a more accurate figure in 6 weeks' time, and it could be better. So 6 weeks went by and I had another scan. They called me into the hospital, and my oncologist came in and she said, got good news for you, the cancer's gone. And I said, what do you mean it's gone? You said it couldn't go. And she said, well, it's a miracle. The cancer on your lymph node and your lung is gone, and we can't give you a prognosis now because there's nothing there.
Wow.
So I was like, blimey. So I came back to work. I'd been off work for about 10 months. I phased myself back in, like a phased return to work. Came back to work. They changed the role of my job slightly so that with just one leg I'd be able to do less walking, and I could use a lift instead of using stairs and things like that. So I came back to work, and exactly a year later, which would have been a couple of weeks ago, I had another scan, and they told me now the cancer's back. So, you know, that only lasted a year of all clear, and now it's back. Now, what they've explained to me this time is that my body is fighting it. The cancer isn't growing at the speed that it should do, because it's a very aggressive and very quick to spread cancer. They're quite shocked at how little it's growing. And they've said, you know, if you have chemotherapy again after what happened last time, it's not recommended. You can't have radiotherapy again. But this time they're saying, because there's some cancer cells on my airway, they're going to try cryotherapy.
Okay.
Now, I'd never heard of cryotherapy. I thought they were going to freeze me for 100 years till they found a cure. But cryotherapy, they put a tube down your throat with a camera and a nozzle attached to it, and they look for the cancer cells on the airway, and they fire liquid nitrogen at the cancer cells to freeze it and kill it. But they can't do it on the lymph node, they can only do it on the airway. So hopefully my breathing would improve a bit, and it wouldn't spread as much. But obviously the ones on the lymph node, at the minute they're growing slowly, but once they speed up, you that's that's a big problem. So I then had to go back to all my family and friends after telling them that I had the all clear, and now tell them again, I haven't got the all clear now, it's back, and so it's been a sort of roller coaster at the minute, and I don't really know what's going to happen next. But this is because I smoked.
Yeah.
And I don't blame anybody. It's my choice to smoke. And there was many years when people, my children, my family, all said to me, "Oh, you should give up smoking." "Oh, yeah, I will." But I didn't. And that was my choice. I chose to do that. And because I did, this is where I am. This is what's happened to me. I wouldn't want this to happen to anybody else, because you really don't realise how precious your life is until something like this happens. My older children, it's going to be hard for them. But when I think of my younger children, who I'm not going to get to walk down the aisle, I'm not going to get to see their grandchildren, and that hurts me. I'm not scared of dying. I've left my mark on this life. I've got 5 children, 7 grandchildren. I've had a good life. So I'm not in any way scared of dying. We're all going to die. I'm just going to die earlier. But I do feel sorry for my younger children. And that's my story so far. Obviously, we've made this video today in the hope that this could put some people off smoking or help them to quit. I'd love it if even one person quit, Also, I'd like the opportunity, if I could, to go into schools or colleges or workplaces and perhaps sit down and tell my story. Hopefully, that might jog a nerve with someone and might, cause somebody else to stop smoking. If it did, again, just one person, it'd be a great benefit.